What's going on, everyone? Honda Fit for Adventure here, and today I'm going to show you how to remove and install the body panels on a Honda MotoCompacto. Please keep in mind that I am not an expert, and this video is just to give you a rough guideline of the removal process, and to show you where all the screws, bolts, and plastic tabs are located. To remove the panels, you're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver, 1 or 2 Allen wrenches, and 1 or 2 plastic pry tools, one of which you'll need to file down to get a sharper edge. I would not recommend using a flathead screwdriver for today's video, as it may scratch or damage the plastic. The screwdriver will not give under pressure, while a plastic pry tool will bend before causing any damage to the plastic paneling. I'd also like to note that the first time separating the panels can be quite difficult. I'm going to make it look quite easy, but this is because I removed them at least 8 times for different camera angles and for other future MotoCompacto videos. With that being said, let's get started. Body panel removal. The first thing we're going to do is remove 4 screws located underneath the MotoCompacto. Next, we're going to start at the back and work our way around, separating the paneling. There's 3 plastic tabs in the back to separate first. Again, this is a rough guideline, and I can't really say which tab you should start on first. Once the back is separated, separate the tab at the bottom of the scooter. The rest of the panel may start to separate, or you may need to continue releasing the tabs one by one. As I work my way around to the front, you'll notice that I start to use a slide and pry method. Basically, if you can get one tab removed, slide the pry tool up along the seam, and the next tab should start to pop out. Now, before removing the panel, make sure to double check all of the tab connections. 1 or 2 may have snapped back together while removing the rest of the tabs. After checking all the tabs, I'd recommend to start taking off the panel from the back while slightly lifting upward. The panel rests on a storage box on a French cleat style system. Once the panel is off the cleat, you can then pull the panel off and away. Once the panel was off, I noticed 2 pieces of Velcro, which I didn't really feel while removing the panel. The process of removing the panel on the other side is almost the same. You'll just have to open up the wheel lock first. Rear fender removal. Remove the 2 Allen bolts, one located on each side. Release the tab underneath the fender, and then pull lightly on the sides to slide the fender off. Now, I broke the tab on my rear fender the first time I took this off because I didn't know how to do it. Luckily, there's still enough plastic on there where the tab connection still works, where it snaps back into place. Once the bolts are secured in place, it's not going to go anywhere either. Front fender removal. The front fender is probably going to be the hardest part of the removal and installation. Start off by popping off the 2 reflective caps, exposing the 2 Allen bolts. Make sure not to lose any of the washers when removing the Allen bolts. Sometimes they'll be stuck inside of the plastic and you don't want them to fall out later. Repeat the process on the other side. Once the bolts are moved, we can separate the plastic paneling. I'm not sure which side would be easier to start from, but I've been starting from the back. Now sometimes it comes loose altogether, and sometimes it gets stuck around the collar. The back side clip back together. Front fender assembly. First, bolt one side of the fender back into place. Make sure to use both of those washers. With one side of the fender attached to the frame, it'll be much easier to snap the other half back on. Or so I say. If you get any small panel gaps, make sure the tabs are all lined up correctly. Give the panels a decent squeeze, and if you still have a small gap, just try pushing down with your finger. The tab is probably lined up correctly, but not locked into place. Rear fender assembly. Pull lightly on the sides of the rear fender and place it over the back tire, lining up the larger holes of the fender with the rear axle. With the fender on, push the tab back into place. Last, resecure the fender using the 2 bolts that we removed earlier. Body panel installation. Slide the panel back on and around the MotoCompacto. Make sure that the top of the panel rests on top of the cleat of the storage box. Depending on what side you do first, you may need to slide it on and over the wheel lock. Next, make sure all the tabs are roughly lined up before squeezing everything back together. I had one panel gap that was giving me an issue. I eventually found out that just pushing down on the gap with my finger caused the tab to smack back into place, and the panel gap was fixed.
Really? All I had to do was push down. I made a bigger deal out of that than it needed to be. Let's put on our 4 screws and that's it.
Now that both panels are snapped back into place, we can put back the 4 screws that we removed on the bottom and wrap this project up. Next up, Honda MotoCompacto battery removal.